That's inspiring. What a powerful, powerful message. The idea of that kind of love in any language. It's easy for me when I hear that music to imagine in the late 1700s and early 1800s in this country, the idea of universal love, universal salvation, of a loving God being preached from under the tents, from the pulpits, up and down the Atlantic seaboard, because that's what happened. That's what happened after John Murray arrived here in this continent. He was preaching it all the way down. Now, John Murray, a little bit more background is helpful to understand what this man went through. He lived in Ireland, and he was a Methodist Calvinist preacher. That means he believed in predestination. And he went to London, and he heard about a woman who needed some help, some salvation. And what he discovered was that she had been attending a special new church started by a man named James Relly. And Relly was a Universalist. The woman convinced John Murray to go hear James Relly. And he did. And he went again and again. And he said something was making sense to him that had not made sense when he believed as a Calvinist Methodist minister. And slowly, with a lot of long talks with people, he converted. He converted to Universalism, and he was promptly excommunicated by the Methodists. And shortly afterward, you heard from Miss Ann that his wife and his one-year-old son took ill and died, as well as 3 sisters and a brother, all in a short period of time. He was bereft, and he was broke, and he was sent to debtor's prison as well. When he was released, he had no friends, he had no family. They had all either died or abandoned him because he would not give up on the message of universal salvation. That message, as it was explained and understood by him, was that God so loved the world, and that God had given Jesus his son, and the son had died fully united with humanity, that all were saved. This was 17th and 18th, 19th century universal salvation message, that all would be saved through Jesus' sacrifice, fully united with humanity. Now, John Murray could have turned bitter and angry. He could have given up on this idea of a loving God when all that pain in his life, but he didn't. He had reached a point in his transformation that he truly believed in a radical form of love that lifted all. What an extraordinary, powerful event, but he was without friends and family. So he did get on a boat, and he ended up here in North America. He landed September 30th, 1770, and he began to preach. Now, where he landed at Potter's Farm is now the Murray Grove Retreat Center, and I put the link for it up at the top of the chat. I invite you to take a look at the Murray Grove Retreat Center. It is a wonderful place where you can go visit. They have workshops, and you can have weddings and events there, and it's just up the coast there in New Jersey. And they are sponsoring a whole weekend here of anniversary of 250 years. I invite you to check it out, the Murray Grove Retreat Center. Still celebrating, still celebrating. Now, a lot of people celebrate and they focus on that kind of odd series of events of Murray arriving and Potter having the chapel as if it was an extraordinary event of miracles. But my interest is more on Murray's transformation, his turn to radical love. The reading was not earlier, I've embedded it here in my sermon, so I'm gonna give you the reading, and this is from Sister Joan Chittister, a Benedictine nun who lives up in Erie, Pennsylvania. And she writes, "Love is something learned only by the long, hard labor of life. It is sometimes over before we've even known we've had it. We sometimes destroy it before we appreciate it. We often have it and simply take it for granted. But sometimes, if we're lucky, we live long enough to grow into it in such a way that because of it, we come to recognize the value of life. As the years go by, We come to love flowers and cats and small infants and old ladies and life on the dock and the one person in life who knows how hot we like our coffee. We learn enough about love to allow things to slip away and ourselves to melt into the God whose love made it all possible. Sometimes we even find a love deep enough, gentle enough, tender enough to detach us from the foam and the frills of life, all of which hold us captive to things that cannot satisfy. Sometimes we live long enough to see the face of God in another. In that case, we have loved. The poets and the storytellers across time have told us about the dimensions of love that last. The poet Rumi wrote, "From myself I am copper, through you, friend, I am gold. From myself I'm a stone, but through you, I'm a gem." Joan Chittister is sharing about the struggles of love and the types of experience of love. And the idea of universal love and salvation comes from agape, as the Greeks would call it. And it's different from the romantic and affectionate love of ideas of eros and philia, although all are potentially transformative. Now I'm going to quote myself here from a sermon I delivered a couple years ago, when I said, and still believe, the brain is the most impressive organ in the body. From the day we are born, it works at hyperspeed 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, right up until the day we fall in love. And that's when the brain cooks up a whole new set of cocktails to befuddle us and confuse us. And we lose control over a series of what happens next. It's the moment when we have a point of transformation. It's the moment when we have a decision. What am I going to do with love? What am I going to allow love to do to me? And where am I going to go with this love? It's a point of transformation that we choose. Now, I asked you guys to send me some stories about your transformative experiences of love. Well, it turns out you guys are kind of shy. You're kind of shy. Only one person sent me something. Thank you, Joe Katrasser. Everybody else has chosen to keep it to themselves, but I know you have had experiences, small and large. Joe wrote beautiful words about his marriage with Sally Joy, that it was a mutual respect for each other and a desire to help the other fulfill their dreams, spoken and unspoken. Thank you, Joe. So I had to go out into the world and find some transformative stories of love. No matter, I have some. And my favorite one is a small one, but powerful one. Several years ago, I met a really powerful and rather expensive macaw. The macaw lived in the pool area of a hotel in Toronto. And as the staff explained to me as I looked at this incredible macaw, that the macaw was in love with the security guard. Every time the security guard made the rounds through the pool, that macaw fluffed up its feathers and wings, started to dance around on its perch and start to squawk. That macaw loved the security guard. And then the awful day came when the security guard retired. The macaw was bereft, started to pluck its feathers out. They had to call the security guard, "Please come back and visit. This bird is not healthy without you." I think love defies norms. Defies norms. There's a powerful story from World War I, where a soldier in battle begs his sergeant to go back into the field where he has left his comrade, and he had promised to be with him when he died and wanted to try and rescue. And the sergeant said, "No, no, no, you cannot, you cannot. I will lose you both for sure." But he begged and he begged. And finally, his officer relented and let him go back out. And when the battle was over and they went back to collect the bodies, they found that young soldier next to his friend in his last breath. And the officer said, "See, I knew this was pointless. Now I have lost you both." And the young soldier said, No, sir, it was worth it." He said, "You see, when I finally got to him, he said to me, 'Jack, I knew you'd come for me.' And then he died." I think love enables us to tremendous acts of courage. It compels us to courage we never knew we had. One of my favorite movies provides a short story of love from Serenity. One of my favorite movies, check it out. It's so much fun. There's a character named Dr. Mathias who's looking at a 3D photo of another doctor who is a renegade and being sought by the bad guys. And the doctor is saying to the operative who is chasing the renegade doctor, "The boy spent his entire fortune developing the contacts to infiltrate this place. Gave up a brilliant future in medicine as well. It's madness." And the operative responded, "Madness? Have you looked at the scan carefully, doctor? At his face? It's love, in point of fact. Something a good deal more dangerous." I think love can be dangerous for the expectations it places on us, that it claims upon us. For its beauty, it claims and can make us dangerous. One of my colleagues, minister up in Toronto, had this story to tell with me. He was officiating at a wedding. The rehearsal had not taken place where the wedding took place. The wedding took place on a dock on Lake Erie. And the gathered folk was, of course, a hoopah, a musician, and his imp. The parents, the bridesmaids, the groomsmen, the bride, and the father. And as they all began to process down onto the dock began to tilt. They all quickly shifted to the other side to counterbalance, and this went back and forth as the dock began to struggle with its balance and went on for a couple of turns, and water sloshed all over the dock, and the amp went over the side. All of those shoes and dresses and good pants were soaking wet. And as they began to balance out again, everybody laughed and said to the bride, who was about to burst into tears, "This actually is what marriage is all about." They commented, and this was the real one that Wayne liked, "Honey, you're going to have to get more than your feet wet to make it in any marriage. So don't worry about this." Love, it seems, in all its forms, it tests us again and again to believe in it. Wayne had another story, also in Toronto. Officiating and waiting for the wedding to begin, Pachelbel's canon begins, and the bride and the father can start down the aisle, and halfway down the bride stops, won't move. Wayne triggers for the music to continue Pachelbel's canon again and again. That's kind of my worst nightmare, but that's another story. He finally walks down to the bride and says, "What's going on?" And the bride says, "I'm afraid I will lose myself in love. How can I live from more than myself and not lose who I am?" Wayne and her dad looked at each other, for they knew at that moment that only the most really evolved people will lose themselves in love, the most giving and the best among us. Wayne said something to that effect about losing yourself to any other imposter is not the way, and that most people like Jesus, this is what they were talking about, that love claims us in a way that is truly transformative. The bride smiled and continued walking down the aisle. I think love shows us what we're made of. It shows us what's inside in a way that we can't always predict. John Murray Love tested him. It showed him what he was made of. And his love from just a few predestined select few was transformed, and his mind and his heart expanded in a way he never thought possible. He was expanded into a universe that he really couldn't fully comprehend, and nor can you or I. But it is to fall in love with something beyond. Love brought him into the experience of true agape, love found in the creation of the universe, and where it defies norms and expectations, where we find courage as it tests us again and again. Murray felt that transcendent love that for him and for Sister Joan Chittister is found in God. Some of you may find that as well, others in different places, but in this transcendent place, this is the territory of mystics and poets, of Jesus in the desert, of Gnostics and Buddha and Bodhisattvas, of Muhammad and Allah, of the genuine gurus and those physicists who fall in love with the universe, of the great teachers and the transcendentalists. It's a stretch for most of us. The journey is long. It's full of bumps and of materialism and a lot of real and fake challenges. Agape, universal salvation, is the realm of transcendent, higher order, if you will say, not judgmental, different, like the atmosphere, raising out of the consciousness of just one to the consciousness of all. It's that point of creation, always unfolding. It's the source of justice for all. It's a source of compassion for all. It's a source of liberation and freedom for all. It's the source where we are compelled to create education and food and water and health for all. It's the source of salvation in this life, not something else. And it's the source that John Murray transcended into. And again, he transcended his own pain to bring that word to a new country. Preaching the story of love of God is at the end of the story. It's at the end of the story, love for all, and we live happily ever after. Oh, I wish that were true. I wish that were true. I'm going to quote myself again here. The brain is the most impressive organ in the body. From the day we are born, it works 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, right up until the point when we fall in love. And then the brain is needed most of all. Whether we fall in love with a puppy, a spouse, a child, a stranger, or the universe, we cannot turn off our neocortex. Maybe this is the Unitarian side of me. Let the heart connect, but let the mind read and interpret all those warning signs on the journey, lest we fall ourselves into a trap. We need critical thinking and reasoning. The heart knows the universe, let the mind knows it's bumpy and full of challenges. Murray's journey continued. After leaving New Jersey, he was preaching up and down the Atlantic coastline about a universal God and salvation, and he had a lot of acclaim, and he also had a lot of critics. The Orthodox were horrified that anybody would start preaching about universal love and God. In fact, he was accused of being a Tory spy, despite serving for Washington's Continental Army as a chaplain. He finally settled down in Gloucester, Massachusetts, founding the first Universalist Church of America in 1779. And he married, watch this name, he married Judith Sargent Stevens, who then became Judith Sargent Murray. Ringing a bell, isn't it, for you? She had her own career as an advocate for women's rights, and she is largely recognized as America's first leading feminist. John Murray's brain was working that day, chose the right woman. He continued his travels as an itinerant preacher and under tense and powerful preaching, and he kept his neocortex engaged. During one sermon, a rock came flying through an open window, narrowly missing his head. He bent and picked up that rock and looked at it, and holding it out said, this argument is solid and weighty, but it is neither rational nor convincing. At another event where he was conversing with an Orthodox minister, the crowd so loved what Murray was saying with great applause that the Orthodox minister's supporters went running outside, came back in with dozens and dozens of eggs, started pelting Murray with eggs. I know, you think that was a more civilized time. The response from Murray was, "These are moving arguments. But I must own, at this time, I have never been so fully treated to bacon and eggs ever in my life." His preaching brought him into the world of Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Jonathan Rush, and other world leaders, and he founded the Universalist Church of America in 1794. He died in 1815, having been transformed by love again and again. Salvation for all. All souls were sacred and worthy, and a belief that has brought us into the 21st century world that we continue to try and live by on a daily basis. But my friends, the story is not over yet. I hope that you are paying attention to something, that you've noticed something in me, and maybe in yourself as well. It's a challenge that we all face, and it's about perspective. A personal challenge. Murray was a straight white male, a part of the Great British Empire, and part of the patriarchy. He was a place of power. He also was easily getting a job and income. I am a straight, white, able-bodied woman. I am part of a privileged white supremacy class. And I speak from that vantage point and that certain perspective of comfort. I have never experienced life as a person of color, Latinx, as Indigenous, as LGBTQ or Asian, or any of the marginalized groups that continually experience aggressions through policies, through community, through churches, through government. I have never had to live that. So perhaps it's easier for me to preach about universal love and salvation. I don't know, because it's a conversation we each need to have with each other. So here's that rub, that tension, that point of chemical balance where transformation happens when we have pain and anger and frustration and mistrust so much in this world right now, in the heart and the heat of the moment, in this realm where I'm talking about love for all. It may be the most challenging thing we human beings can do. I cannot judge another. This is my journey. But I cannot judge someone who may be in a different place with their perspective of life and their experiences. I honor their journey. So shall I place judgment upon Harriet Tubman, who prayed daily that her master, who beat her cruelly and owned her till she earned her freedom? She prayed daily for that master to either, for God to turn his heart or to be taken from this life. I cannot judge. I have never been in such a situation. I only know this, that I will live day by day, as much as I can, that I will wish no harm upon any living creature. I will live or wish no suffering and no illness or death. These are my companions on the human journey. No matter, even if I find their behavior abhorrent and profoundly irresponsible and harmful to so many. It is a very difficult place to be. But it's the challenge that we each face. I will not wish suffering upon another. I know this. Love defies norms. Love invites us into courage. It can be dangerous for the expectations it places upon us, and that love will challenge us again and again. This I know, and it shows me what I'm made of. So I invite you, let's thank John Murray for what he brought to this country and to us, and let us walk into this world looking for stories of radical transformation and opportunities to enter into them. May our hearts be transformed. Blessed be. Amen. Ashe.